you are living differently as a consequence of this. We might see something like insomnia or hypersomnia. So insomnia is not sleeping, right? Hypersomnia is sleeping way too much. And if we see a balance shift from your sleeping habits, that's also something we're looking for. A lot of people don't know this, but we're also looking for physical symptoms like what's called psychomotor agitation, or psychomotor retardation during the day. And so what that means, again, is that you're twitching, you're fidgeting, you're shaking, or you're slow. Your reflexes have come down. And we're actually seeing a restlessness or a drowsiness and a fatigue. And that's another thing, is fatigue, loss of energy, seeing this low kind of battery significantly throughout the day. Feelings of worthlessness, excessive or inappropriate guilt is something we're looking for. And here's another thing a lot of people don't think about, but diminished ability to concentrate, indecisiveness, suddenly a loss of your ability to sort of pilot your own life, and feeling listless and kind of despondent and not dialed in. And then for a lot of people, Nick, there's that recurrent thought of death. And, suicide is a big risk in this as well. And so those folks are kind of the package of symptoms that Nick and I are looking for. We actually have kind of a checklist. And so when we're getting to know somebody and we're doing an assessment and kind of a diagnosis, we're often interviewing them looking for evidence of those traits. And if we're seeing those traits, we're getting closer to saying, this is a problem. But an important criteria that the listener needs to understand, Nick, is that even if you can check all the boxes I just said, the most important thing is also clinically significant distress.
Right. Yeah. So it has to be impacting your life in some manner, which if you're having all those symptoms, it's probably is, right?
It probably is.
It's affecting your relationships with other people. It's affecting your ability to go to and be productive at work. All sorts of different impacts in your daily life.
So now we've identified that there is this depression epidemic. We've identified for the listener, hey, clinically, here's how we medically see this, and here's how we pick it out of a crowd. But Nick, what are some of the things that we'll do non-prescription? I mean, besides giving people medicine, what is one of the things that we might do to try to help them?
Well, yeah, so there's a couple different ways of treating this. There's the pharmacological way of prescribing a medication.
Which we're fine with, by the way. We have no beef with that. We're all the above guys. We believe in kitchen sink therapy. Throw everything at it.
And then psychotherapy, which is what Jim and I will do. So, once we get somebody with depression involved in therapy, then there's a variety of different techniques and therapeutic models that can be used within psychotherapy. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused brief therapy, motivational interviewing.
Right.
There's a lot of different techniques and
a lot of different approaches.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that you had mentioned was cognitive behavioral therapy. And so what a lot of folks that are kind of uninitiated in psychology don't know is that we as therapists all have different therapeutic theories for how we approach a problem. And I usually compare this to mixed martial arts fighting, like UFC. Put any given amount of fighters in the octagon, they all fight differently. Some are on the ground, some are kickers, some are punchers, some are wrestlers, but they all have the same goal. It's just like beat up the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And so like as therapists, we all have these different theories that we approach from, and that's how we fight the problem. But you're a huge advocate of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is considered the gold standard when you're dealing with depression and anxiety. What does that look like? I know we don't want to get – well, you said this segment's called Getting Into the Weeds, so you gave us permission to do it. And, folks appreciate that sometimes. We're going to wrap it up. But, unpack that for the listener a little bit. Teach them what is cognitive behavioral therapy. Why is that a unique approach, and how does it think about the problem?
Well, and as an addiction specialist, I love CBT because that's it works so well for that. But essentially, we're looking at how we view a situation, the perception that we have over a situation, how that affects our emotions and our behavior. So, like the example that I always like to use is getting an understanding of our automatic thought process. And here's the thing that's really kind of interesting, and it's a different way of looking at it. You've heard the that old saying of like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right.
Well, I was reading this book. It's called the name of the book is This Is Your Brain on Music.
Oh. And
it's written by, I forget the guy's name, but he's a neurologist and really brilliant, and he kind of answers that question. That riddle has an answer. And
okay,
the answer
about
is,
the tree.
Yeah, the answer is no.
Okay.
And the reason why is because sound is internal. Sound happens
In the brain.
inside our head.
Okay.
Right? So if there's no receiver,
There's
no sound.
There's just
Right.
vibrating wind.
So it's kind of like taking that approach to things, but looking at that from like in terms of like an event.
Right.
When an event happens, I think we're brought up to believe that an event happens and that event causes an emotional reaction.
Right.
Right. But in reality, the event is just the event.
Right.
It has no meaning until we give it meaning.
Right.
So whatever that event means to me, that's what causes the emotional reaction, and that's what then drives the behavior. So as an example, let's say, it's my favorite example to use. Let's say we've got Timmy. Timmy is 9 years old, and he's a Little League baseball player, and Dad doesn't show up for his game.
Right.
It's not that Dad didn't show up for his game that causes him to feel hurt and sad. It's what it means to Timmy that Dad didn't show up.
Right.
So if he internalizes that event and says, Dad's not here because Dad doesn't care about me, then that part right there, that's what drives the emotion.
I see.
Then that's what drives the behavior.
Yes.
Right? He could just as easily come up with a different automatic thought or a different meaning behind the event, which will have a completely different emotional reaction, emotional response, different behavior following that up.
And so CBT basically says the way you interpret your reality affects your response to your reality, and even colors the kind of life you're going to live, whether or not you experience anxiety or whether or not you experience depression, which is weird for folks. And I remember the last lecture you gave on this, somebody had raised their hand and said, but depression feels like it happens to me. I don't feel like I'm choosing it. And that's a really frustrating thing for people that have depression is they'll say, somebody loves them and say, why can't you just cheer up? Why can't you just not think about it? Why can't you just get through it? Feel better, and it's like, that's maddening to them because they're like, that's insulting to me. Like,
it is.
I don't elect for this. I am suffering from it. I'm trapped inside of a glass box.
Yes.
And I don't know how the hell I got in here.
Yeah. And that's a really good point because that's something you don't want to say to somebody who's depressed because they know that.
Yes.
Like, I've known people who have made comments such as like, well, he's got a good girlfriend and he's got a place to go.
Everything's going great.
Why is he depressed?
There's no reason.
He shouldn't. Well, he knows that.
Yeah.
But that's part of what depression is.
Exactly.
That's what makes it so frustrating is because the person knows that like, I know I shouldn't be feeling this way, but I do.
Yes. And so like a therapeutic approach in cognitive behavioral therapy is how we reprogram the person's thinking so that the way that the world around them makes sound in their mind is fundamentally different. They hear it differently after we go through that process of rewiring them, which actually has a mitigating effect on the symptoms of depression to the point where we can actually get through it.
And there is actually, what I described, that 4-step process, event, automatic thought, emotion, behavior, is that's one part of it. That's kind of the what we call thought mapping. There's also the CBT triangle, which is kind of this triangle that's between your emotions, your behaviors, and your thoughts. And the idea is that within this triangle, you've got these arrows, but they go both ways. So meaning that if you change one of those three, you fundamentally affect the other two.
I see.
So if I am dealing with depression and my emotions are sadness, hurt, hopelessness, my behaviors are I stay in bed all day, I don't talk to anybody, I don't get out of the house, and then my thinking is life isn't worth it, and I'm never going to have success, I'm never going to go anywhere. I just need to change one of those three.
Right.
And I change the other two.
They'll all be affected.
So for me, I like to change. I like to work on behavior, and this is just my own personal thing. It's easy for me to change my thinking if I'm doing something different.
I see.
So forcing myself to get out of the house,
and trusting that the rest will change as a domino effect.
I'll go out to Red Rock. I'll go hiking.
Right.
Because I know when I go out and I get active, or when I go to the gym in the morning, days I go to the gym, I'm positive.
Right.
I feel really good.
Start with the behavior and the rest will follow.
Yeah. So I do that, and then that will then change my thinking and will change the emotion.
Great advice.
There's one last thing. You opened this can of worms. Remember
I did.
that. So,
yeah, I did. Go ahead.
One last thing with this too. I heard somebody say once, and I really truly believe this, and I say this to each one of my clients in the morning. I used to do the group in the morning, like one of the first groups of the day. And I would always challenge them. Win the first hour of the day. The first hour of the day is the most important. If you can win that first hour, you've won the rest of the day.
Wow.
Okay. But, and that means getting active right away, because your first instinct, the very first thing that happens is your alarm goes off and your first reaction to it is to fight it.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
You have to win that battle.
Yes.
And then you have to win the next battle after that. And if you win the first hour, then you've set yourself up. So every morning, 5 days a week, I'm waking up, I'm going to the gym.
Right. You're winning that first hour.
Yeah, before I get to work. So every morning when I get to work having already done something that I didn't think I could do.
Right.
Imagine the power that has on your day.
Yes.
When you can start off your day having already accomplished something that you didn't think you could do.
Yeah, it's a cascade effect. And it's like what you talked about with if you can affect one of the pieces, the rest can be affected as well. You can move this in segments. But, by way of just coming back to the study, one of the things I see in this, Nick, is when I see a 33% increase in the diagnosis of this, that can scare people, but also as a therapist, it makes me very hopeful because it shows me that 33% more people are also getting active, like they're putting their feet in the office of a therapist. And if you're out there today and you are experiencing this, just know I'm an all of the above kind of guy. I think there's a role for medicine. I think there's a role for therapy. I think they work best together. I don't think you should just go take your pills and then go back to bed. I think that you need to get out and you need to get out and do something with us. And, just know that this is a form of medicine. Psychology is a form of medicine. It is effective. You didn't choose to experience this. We know that. We don't blame you for that. But you are responsible for your recovery from it. And change is possible with help. And don't be afraid to get that help because it can really make a difference in your life. You don't have to live that way. There's another way to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is actually really, I'm glad you brought that up because you can look at this and you can be really scared. But you also have to remember, how is this data collected? It was collected by an insurance company,
right?
Which means they have a diagnosis,
yes.
Which means they've received help.
Yes.
So we could also say that more people are receiving help.
Yes, 33% more people have been getting help since 2013.
Yes.
So that's another way to look at it. If you're out there today, add to that number.
Yep,
make that number bigger. We want to see people getting help.
Wow, I like how we just took that from very cloudy and
ray of sunshine. Yeah, this is an upbeat podcast.
We reframed it.
That's right.
This is CBT.
We did it.
We cognitively reframed it
into.
There we go.
We changed our.
Now we're happy. Look at that.
We are.
All right. Well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we are going to get into some listener mail. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
You're back with Pod Therapy, and we are taking your questions. Our first question today is about psychiatric medication. Here's the question. My wife of 6 years just started taking meds for anxiety and depression. Now her behavior is erratic, and she's done things that have scared me. Is it appropriate to insist she see another doctor? My wife of 6 years has been depressed for about a year after her father died. To me, it seemed like very normal grieving, and she was doing well in therapy, but her friend strongly suggested that she needed to see a psychiatrist to get on medications. So she did. She went on antidepressants, and her mood got better, but they also made her anxious. So she went back and got anti-anxiety medications. This somehow affected her blood pressure, so she was given medications for that. Those medications affected her sleep, so they gave her Ambien for daily use and Valium in case of emergencies. This affected her work, so now she's on an ADHD drug called Ritalin. So in a little over 6 weeks, she went from not wanting to even take aspirin for a headache to 7 different psychiatric medications. Twice now, she's really scared me. The first incident was I came home to find her literally slumped over and passed out next to the toilet. She claims that she had just fallen asleep, but she had feces all over her legs, and her face was red, almost like she'd passed out, fallen off the toilet, and hit her face on the bathtub on the way down. Yesterday was worse. We went to see a movie, and she was an emotional roller coaster. She went from screaming to laughing to cheering, more than was appropriate for being in a movie theater, to sobbing uncontrollably at the end. Then she fell asleep at the wheel on the way home. Thank God